From the second reading today, St. Paul is talking to the Corinthians about division. And basically he's talking about how people are bragging about belonging to Paul or Apollos or Cephas or one or the other group. And it's this ancient problem of wanting to belong and yet at the same time wanting to differentiate ourselves. Talk to anybody who's going through puberty about that difficulty. But basically, we're always trying to be a part of something, but we're always also trying to show that we're special. Both are good things, because we do need to be included. There's something to be said about being a part of a community, about contributing to the greater whole, but there's also something to be said about how every individual one of us is a gift and has certain gifts and talents, and we're not just supposed to be plugged into a role, but people to be discerned. It's a difficult thing to navigate, and we see this, I think, most starkly whenever we have differing viewpoints on something. Maybe it's differing nations, for instance, what one nation's policy is versus another, what one football team is preferred over another, whenever you're at Wiley versus Cooper versus Abilene High, or whatever else. There's something to be said about the differentiation leads to division, which can be a good thing if it spurs on rivalries to greatness, but again, it can be a destructive thing when it's like in the community of the Corinthians here, where it just leads to splitting of the Christian community. Because the last thing I would want anybody to do, for instance, is here in Abilene, if we're so focused on our individual parishes, I belong to Holy Family, I belong to St. Francis, I belong to wherever, that we start to forget that we belong ultimately to Christ. That we're all united in that one goal and mission. But again, as we go through life, there's all sorts of reasons that we might differentiate ourselves, one group from another. Tomorrow is the anniversary of when Roe versus Wade was announced, and of course it's been overturned recently. But that's one of those areas where there can just be met with nothing but division. And I think the problem is because we're so entrenched on both of our sides that we believe we're right. And frankly, of course we believe we're right on this side of things because we believe that the church doesn't teach us untrue things. But whenever a differentiation of opinion or belief keeps us from being able to talk to one another like we're human beings, there's a problem there. The devil, diabolane is where his name comes from, means to throw a cross. It means to scatter things. And that is exactly how the evil one wins, when he divides us among each other and has us fighting each other instead of focusing on the Lord. I think what we could all stand to do in the discussion, if you will, on pro-life things is not only to speak the truth, sure, absolutely, and to speak the truth out of love, but also, I think, put our money where our mouth is. I think where we lose credibility as a church is the fact that we don't necessarily do enough to support people who are in these difficult situations. Because I've heard it all the time. People say, well, geez, you're celibate, so you don't have to worry about kids or whatever. Or you just don't understand the difficult situation that somebody's in, and that's why an abortion should take place. But if we do understand, because we walk with people, because even though they might come from a different background or understanding or faith or whatever else is going on in their life, if we're willing to walk with them and love them, even though they might not believe the same things as us, then there's no more argument, I think. So as we go through life, it's not enough to just argue for the truth, but to really try to reach across boundaries and love, to try to understand why somebody might be fighting for the things that they fight for. and to let them know that they belong, even though they might not understand what we do or believe what we do, but that they are loved. And my hope is that if we can do that well, then it might end up changing the world. Because that's what Christ did. There was something about him and his presence that he was able to come from that land of Zebulun and Naphtali, a land of Gentiles, and make a difference. There was something about his presence that was enough for these 4 people today in the gospel reading to drop everything that they had to follow him. They dropped their whole livelihood to follow a man they just met. So what was the difference? Again, I think it might be love.